Hello, I'm Tristan and I'm the Product Director at DeltaXML. Today I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of the DeltaJSON app so you can have a look at what the main features are, look at some of the settings, and the aim of that is to enable you to get started and have a play for yourself. I'm not going to go through all of the different settings, but it should be enough to allow you to take a look at it for yourself and to start to experiment with your own inputs and settings. This is the welcome page, and this is where you'll land when you first log into the application. And when you initially log in, you'll get a refresh banner at the top telling you it's loading your subscription details. But once that's happened, you get this blue banner, which will tell you all about the subscription you've got, your renewal date. It also gives you quick links to going back to our My Delta portal, and you can also download your token if you're wanting to use the REST API, and you can use that token to authorize your REST calls. But that's not necessary if you're using the app, and we won't talk any more about that in this particular video. So underneath that banner, you've got a quick way of starting each of the different operations, and we're going to go through in a slightly different route, but if you know what you want to do, pressing on one of those is a good way to get to the page that you need. And below that, we've got some information and some educational videos telling you a little bit about the product and about the result files. All of that's also available on our documentation website, but this is a good quick way to get to that without leaving the app. So we're going to start over on the left-hand side and take a quick look at what these menu items are. The welcome page is where we've landed. This is a really important one. This is the configuration page. So this enables you to select your operation that you want to run, and we have these 5 different operations, which we'll go through in a moment. And for each one of those, you can set your input files and set which parameters you want to use for that particular operation. It then allows you to run it, and it'll inform you once the operation has completed, and you can then go and take a look at your result files. Talking of which, they will appear on this tab here. So this is the Files tab. It's got nothing loaded up at the moment. If I want to, I can start to write things in there, and those can be my input files, or I can upload files, and once I've done that, they'll appear here as inputs. Also, the result files will appear here once the operation is finished. And then we also have jobs history. So you can take a look here, again, for each of the operations, what jobs you might have run in the past. And you can also kind of click on those and see the result file for it, download the result file. You can also change the descriptions, and when you're running the operation, I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then we've got the log files. The logs are kind of based on this specific session. It will show you the logs of the operations you've been running. We haven't done anything yet in this session, so there's no logs available. So let's go back to the configuration page to start a compare operation. So we've got compare selected. I can choose some input files. Some input files are loaded. It will validate them to check that they're valid JSON. If you get an exclamation mark there, a red exclamation mark, it will mean that the JSON isn't valid and you won't be able to run the operation. The result file name is set for you by default, but you can change that if you want to, something like my result. You can also change the description of the job. So let's call it something like my awesome comparison, and we'll see where that appears later. Oh, it also seems to be modifying the result file based on the job description. Again, if you wanted to change that back, you can change that to something else. We're going to run this with a word-by-word comparison, which means that it's going to, when it's comparing text, do it in a detail rather than a block of text. And at this point, now that we've got the input files in, we should actually be able to see them either by clicking on the files thing here or view files there. Now we can see the 2 different inputs. Here's input A and input B. It's kind of slightly contrived data, but that's just to help you to see the kinds of operations that the compare does for different types of data. So we've got some objects here, and we've got an array of objects here as well. And we'll see what happens during our comparison. The array alignment is an interesting feature because you can change the way that those arrays are compared. We're going to do it by an orderless comparison, which means that if the order of objects in an array changes, then it won't necessarily mark that as a change in the result. But if they move and change, then that will be shown. We'll see that in a second. So I'll run that. So we get this little box appearing. If we hover over it, it stops the countdown timer, and that is telling us that the comparison is completed. And if you want to click on that, we can take us straight to the Files tab, and we can see our results. So here we can see two different views of the result. On the left-hand side is what we call the raw view. So this is our JSON delta. You'll see things like DX delta keys in there, which mean that there's been a change. So this modified data, there's a change within that. This is some of the text that is unchanged. Here's the actual word change, because we did a word-by-word granularity, and we can see that input A, we had the word changes, and in input B, we had the word modifications, and then back to the kind of unchanged text. That happens throughout the JSON tree here, and you can see added data is marked as B, deleted data is marked as A. And the interesting thing to note is what's happened to our array. Now, you may have noticed that the order changed. So we had 1, 2, and 3, and now we've got 2, 1, 3, and 4. It hasn't actually shown a change to the order of 2 and 1 because we were comparing the array orderless. It has showed that the John Doe has been updated to Jane Doe, and it also shows that item number 4 here, Peter Jones, has been added because he's only in input B. So that's the kind of result you get as a raw delta. There's also this kind of view over here which styles the JSON to give you some indication of what's happened. It's a little bit easier to view perhaps with the red and the green backgrounds to show where red for deletion and green for addition. If you want to, you can download the files, go back to the configuration, and we can download our result file by clicking on here. You can also see in the jobs history, once that refreshes, we should now have our comparison in there. We've got our description, my awesome comparison. If we click on it, we can see that result file and can download it from there as well. And it tells you a little bit about the settings that you had. So if you wanted to change the settings and see what effect that has, you can look at the different result types and compare the different results together. But let's go back to our configuration and run a different operation. So a comparison was comparing two different inputs and marking how they were different. The two-way merge is similar, except that this time it doesn't run a delta. It actually create a delta. It performs a merge of the two files. So if we select the same two inputs, we'll see a slightly different result this time. And I'm going to give it a merge priority of B, which means if there's any conflict between the two values in the content, JSON content, it's going to pick the B version to put into the result. So we'll run that. Okay, so we can take a look at the result file. And now we only get one result because it's just a merged file. And you can see that we've got our unchanged data, we've got modified data, and that's the B value of the modified data rather than the A value. We've got some added data and some deleted data because those don't conflict with one another. They appear in both. So this is the nature of the kind of two-way merge. And then our values in this array, we've got everything that was in B effectively. So it's most of B because we chose the B priority, plus some of the content that was only in A, and I think that's only this kind of deleted data in this particular instance. But it's effectively done a merge of those two files, and where there was where items appeared in both input files, it chose the B version as priority. So that's a two-way merge. Now if we go back to the configuration panel and take a look at our three-way merge, this is slightly different. So in this scenario, we have an ancestor, and then imagine that that ancestor file has been edited by two different people to create two new edits, two new inputs. So we put all those in as our inputs. So you can see the inputs have been loaded. We've got our ancestor file, we've got our edit 1 and edit 2. Those are both edits of the ancestor. And what this merge is going to do is going to merge those three files together. We'll put word by word comparison back on, and it's going to, there might be conflicts between them. If there are conflicts, then what happens is we go with our conflict resolution. We can either show the conflict in our Delta format that you saw from the comparison, or we can resolve the conflict by picking the A value or the B value. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave it on show, so it's going to show the conflicts as a Delta file. We can run this. Okay, the merge is completed, and again we can click on here to see our result file. And here I didn't show the inputs, but the results kind of go towards explaining what's happened in the inputs themselves. So we've got some unchanged data, we've got some that has been modified by edit 1, some that's been modified by edit 2, some that's been modified by both in the same way, and we might have some that's been modified in different ways, and so on. So where there has only been one change, that value has been merged. So only edit 1 modified this, and if we take an ancestor over here, this value will have changes in edit 1. Now it says this value will have modifications in edit 1, and that was the change that was made by edit 1. It's gone through as a non-conflicting change, and it's been into this merged result. And then again for edit 2, we have the edit 2 there, because that is what appears in edit 2, where we've got double modification, and they've both modified in the same way. That comes through as a non-conflict. And here then we've got modification conflicts. So in the ancestor, we had this value will be changed in different ways in each edit. Edit 1 said this value will be modified in different ways in each edit, and then edit 2 said this value will be updated in different ways in each edit. So in our in this view, we see the two different values as the two different edits, but in our Delta, what we see under the modification conflicts, this is all unchanged, and then we see the conflicting values here, edit 1's value there, and edit 2's value there. So if we wanted to further process that or highlight that as a change and present it back to someone to manually resolve it, we could do. And again, we have similar things throughout the result, where there might be simple additions, double additions of the same data, and perhaps conflicts where the same key has been added but the values are slightly different. You also get conflicts where one version modifies something and the other version deletes it. That counts as a conflict as well. So there's a few different types of conflict in there. As I say, if we'd run it with a resolve those conflicts by edit 1 or edit 2, we wouldn't see this red and green. We'd get the values that happen to appear in whichever edit we chose as the target for the resolution. Just to remind you there, we can resolve it with A or we can resolve it with B. And again, there are other settings on there about arrays. Now to take a look at Graft. Now Graft is a slightly different type of operation. It's a little bit like a patch, except that it's a slightly more intelligent patch, because it's less fragile in terms of if the patch change set has information in it that can't be applied to the target, it doesn't break. When you create a patch file, the patch file has to be able to apply all of the changes in the patch to the target that you're patching, and if it can't find where to put a change, then it will fail. But the Graft is a little bit more intelligent than that, and it will only apply those changes which are applicable to the target, and any changes that it can't find where to put them in the target, it just ignores. To show you the files, I'm just going to load them up into compare here so we can take a look at them in the files panel. So I've loaded Graft input A and Graft input B, as I say, just so we can look at them in the files panel, because these aren't used as the actual inputs. These will be would have been used originally to have created a DeltaJSON change set, and then that change set is used effectively to then patch another input file. So this is very, very simple. We've got some unchanged data, we've got some changed data that changes from original to update, and then we've got some other change data which is labeled as irrelevant change data. It will be relevant to this patch file, we can see changes in it, but as we'll see with the target later on, there's no relevant place to apply that change set in the target, and so it will get ignored. So these were used to create a change set, which is going to become the input to our Graft operation. So the change set here is our Graft change set. That's the JSON file that has been created by comparing those two inputs with DeltaJSON and downloading the result. And then we've got a target input, which is the target we're going to graft that change set onto. We can take a look at that. This is just not formatted. It's not particularly easy to read here. I happened to have downloaded it and it hasn't pretty printed it. But you can see that where we had the irrelevant, let me try and find the right place. What was it called? Irrelevant changed data. There's nowhere to apply that change set, and so it just will ignore it and it won't apply the changes that are in that change set to the target. If we go back to the configuration and run this, the graph's completed. We can take a look at the results. And here is the result. There's only one result because it's the grafted file. This is the target that we were applying the changes to. And you can see now that the change data has been updated. It says this is the update, whereas the original file said this is the original. And that's the only change that's been applied. Even though there were more changes in the change set, it hasn't applied them because there was nowhere to apply them to in the target JSON. Items that were only in the target JSON, like this one, for example, that's still in our result. So it's effectively the target with as many changes as it could be applied by the change set and all others ignored. And that's the result you get from the graft. The final operation then is our patch. That will create a standard JSON patch file. And to do that, you just put in two inputs. Rather than producing a DeltaJSON Delta file, that produces the patch file that you could use with JSON Patch to update another file with the changes. So I've uploaded the inputs. We're just going to use the same inputs we used for our comparison operation, and we can run that patch. The operation is completed, and we can take a look at the results. And you can see now that actually this is it's a JSON file, it's a standard JSON patch, and it's talking about the different operations, replaces, adds, removes, and how you would go about patching the input A to produce input B. So that's, as I say, a standard JSON patch file, and you would use the JSON patch operation to patch your original JSON file. It's not as robust as the graft, sorry. So we'd recommend using the graft, but if you are making use of JSON Patch anyway, it's there and you're able to produce the results. So the final thing to look at then is the log file. We had no information in there earlier. Now we do have lots of information, so you can see the log file for compare and two-way merge and three-way merge and all the different operations that we've been running. And you can actually look at these if you've got a longer running operation. You can look at these to see what's happening on the operation you're running, and it will tell you some information about what's happening in the background. You can clear those individually, or you can clear the whole thing, and then all your logs are cleared. Final two things then, there's a couple of different buttons here. One is to submit some feedback. If you want to tell us anything about the DeltaJSON app, good or bad, please click on that and provide some feedback for us. Or if you want to contact us, you can click on here to go to our website with the contact us form and pass information to us that way. So thank you very much for taking a look at that with me. I know there was a lot to get through, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a starter for how to compare or merge or graft your own JSON files for yourself. So thanks very much for listening, and see you soon.